Thanks for coming. First of all, can you guys, is that reverberating or does it sound okay where it is?
Sounds okay.
It's okay? All right, if that changes, let me know.
That's fine.
Do any of us need this talk? You think? Yeah? It's funny. I in the process of getting ready for this, I had two examples in my life where a friend or a family member actually reached out. Hey, what do I do in this situation? And it was all around, evolving around communication at home. So pretty cool how it ties in. So the goal tonight, this is very important. If you're taking notes, by the end of tonight's talk, before I do that, the books listed at the bottom is where I got all of the information from for this talk. The help guide, I think is what that says, right? Helpguide.org. Some modern ideas, modern psychology type ideas. Just a few I grabbed. The Gospel According to Spiritism is a great book. Courage, you may not have heard of. It's not in I don't know if we have it in our bookstore, but it's very much like Happy Life, except it's all the topics in it are about fortitude and increasing ways to improve your ability to cope and deal with adversity. Green Light is another one like that, so we have some clips from there. I'd just like to make sure you know that I'm not responsible for any of this. I just was given the responsibility, the pleasure of preparing this to help us all educate. And you guys know I like to usually start with something light and funny a lot of times, so the next slide is important, maybe. But here's the goals, all right? By the end of tonight, you're going to learn how to text your spouse from the other side of the house, how Facebook messaging that really works and is effective, and how to use Google Calendar to schedule a face-to-face. That's totally a joke, but nobody's laughing. All right? But that's what it's coming down to, it seems, in the world, right?
I already do all that.
You do, right? And it's obviously very effective because I've never seen you and your spouse have an adverse situation. So, you know. But this really is what it feels like communication is coming down to. I can't tell you how many times I'm either asked or I ask others, hey, just text me. Or, hey, shoot me an email. Send me that address in a text, right? Because it's easier, right? We have all this amazing technology to make our lives easy, and we're disconnecting face to face. So this is really not the goal for tonight, but I couldn't help but add it because it made me laugh. If you go to that website I mentioned, there's 3 things listed as a way to improve effective communication skills, not just at home, but anywhere in your life. And all these are pretty common sense. And they tie into the Spiritist stuff we're going to read tonight a little bit. They tie into the gospel. Because at the core, this is all about face-to-face. It's all about helping your partner understand you without the deeper revelations, I guess. But essentially, the first thing they recommend is for good, effective communication, you've got to be a really good listener, all right? I was reminded of that yesterday at work. I had a patient who I saw probably 8 months ago. And she basically came out and told me that I wasn't that engaged with her. She felt she didn't get treatment. She didn't go get the help she needed. And I was asking her why. And she says, well, I really didn't feel like you were engaged with me. I felt like you were leaving it up to me to make a decision. You didn't kind of push me one way or the other. And to me, that's a good thing, right? I don't want to push somebody down a road they may not be ready. Luckily, she saw a colleague of mine, her primary care doctor, and he brought her. I said, well, how come you're not doing anything about your hearing? He's also a patient of mine, so he wears hearing aids that I helped him get, and he's a very happy patient. And he said, she told him the same thing. Well, he wasn't engaged with me. He didn't seem like he was really in there, right? So he hit home to her. He says, well, that's not how Al is. Al's not a salesman. He's not trying to sell you anything. He's not going to push you. He wants you to come up with your own answers. But even though that's good, right, in my profession, it's bad because here's a woman that went 8 months that I didn't listen enough. I didn't get the important piece. She was ready for help 8 months ago, but I didn't listen enough, and I let her walk away without help. So that really hit home for me. I need to spend less time talking. We need to spend less time talking sometimes and really listen. And we want to create an environment where everybody feels safe according to these tips. And when there's confusion, when there's adversity, when there's perhaps negative emotions being displayed, they point out, look, make it quick, right? Save some time by clarifying the information. If it looks like there's confusion, if it looks like you're upsetting somebody with your words, clarify. Hey, was something I said, I meant this, I didn't mean that. Make sense? Yeah, good. Number 2 is something we don't always think about. I can totally be feeling one thing and showing something with my body, and something else is coming out of my mouth. I see that with my kids all the time. They say, yes, sir, right? But they have a negative look on their face. They're maybe shaking their head like, no. They're slumped down like, okay, I'll do it. But you can just tell they're not engaged. But we do it as adults, too. So we want to make sure that we are using nonverbal signals that match up with our words. If we look negative, if we have negative expressions, no matter what's coming out of our mouth, it's going to be influenced by the way we're sitting, by the way we're looking. So we have to pay attention to what we're doing with our body. And then finally, they recommend, whoops, sorry guys, new microphone, I'm not used to that. They recommend that you be aware of your stress levels when you're having conversations at work, at home, because as you get stressed in an environment, what happens a lot of times? We get stressed and our temper gets short, our patience gets short, our ego gets bruised more easily. Anytime we're under stress, we're more likely to make rash decisions or not completely engage in something. So they just recommend that we find a way to calm down. What's that popular marketing thing now? See, stay calm and something, right? There's different things. Stay calm and whatever you're into. But it reminded me of that. Stay calm. Realize you're stressed. Let the other person know, hey, I'm a little stressed. I need a 5-minute break. I'll be right back. Or crack a joke, which I do too often. You don't want to do that too often in a stressful situation. But somehow just find a way to break the stress, maybe just agree to disagree on a topic, don't pursue it anymore at that time, and walk away. So those are how modern psychology looks at some of this stuff. What about the spiritist side of this? How do we look at ways of improving communication and the significance of it? Well, there's a book called Courage that I don't have a copy of. I meant to, and my apologies, I didn't have access to my printer at work today. I hope to have had handouts for you. I got a picture of it, but man, that book would be awesome rather than using my phone. Thanks, Pam. Look at that. You just happened to bring that?
Sylvia asked about it.
Really? Isn't that something?
I happened to find it, which was.
This is Pam, everybody, if you haven't met her. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. I'll give it back to you. So in this book, Courage, number 23, first of all, this book is, it's published by the Spiritist group of Brighton, which is, I think, in the UK, if I'm not mistaken. But it's psychographed by Francisco Xavier through his spirit guide. And 23 says this. It's translated, so it says in the domestic atmosphere. So that would be in our home, in our social circle, right, domestically. Not necessarily at work, but it could be, right? It says this: the passage of the Good Samaritan, repeatedly studied, always gives us new teachings. The compassionate traveler finds an injured man on the road, right? You guys have heard this, I'm sure. What's he do, right? He doesn't walk away like others have. He doesn't ignore the situation. He jumps right in and he helps the person that was stranded on the street that was hurt. He stretches out his hands. He takes care of his wounds. He helps him without any prejudice. He's not judging. He's not asking questions. He's just attending to this perfect stranger. Right? Then, once he attends to the immediate needs of the man that's hurt, he takes him to an inn so that the injured man can have a rest. Right? He stays with him. He stops his travel, checks into a room. He feeds him. He bathes him. Right? Cleans his wounds. All that good stuff. And he stays with him till the man is reasonably okay on his own. Right? And doing all of this, he doesn't ask any questions. And before he leaves this guy, right, he doesn't ask anything of the guy. He doesn't want to get reimbursed. He doesn't ask him any personal information. He's not looking for anything in return. But he simply provides enough money to the innkeeper to pay for his assistance and his recovery. Totally anonymously, essentially. And through this message, what Jesus is teaching us is the exercise of real charity, right? And they say here that up until now, right, nearly 2,000 years have gone by since this was written, since Christ walked the earth. That it really wasn't applied to strangers. We don't necessarily do it with strangers, but we do provide charity in our social group. Like, we wouldn't think of leaving a family member stranded on the street. We wouldn't think of leaving somebody that we know stranded on the street. But if we see something happening that doesn't involve us, we don't want to get involved, we might dial 911. We might walk away. Who knows? But that it's teaching us that in addition to helping those strangers, right, that the people at home that we wouldn't leave stranded, they experience hardships and challenges that may not be as severe as a beating, right, or dying, but they're going through their own social traumas, they're going through their own difficulties with their life, right? And oftentimes, we do ignore that, right, because we're so caught up in our thing. So the point they're trying to build here is that our friends, our family, the people that are in our social circle, they say here that they do not come from Jerusalem to Jericho, which was the path traveled by the person in that parable, right? It's not such a big journey. These people are right here next to us. They live with us. They work with us. They might be our relative, that not in our house, but we talk to them frequently, and that they're victims of obsessions, of errors, and some of their biggest dreams and hopes have been plundered, right? They've gone through terrible defeats, right? And they're just down, and they're out, and they're really hurting, and we shouldn't ignore them. We should go out of our way to be there for them. And that parable of the Good Samaritan isn't just about strangers. Does that make sense, or did I totally butcher that? It's okay? Good. Thank you for being kind. As we talked about, right? The biggest point that I took from this passage and the summary was simply that all of us, for the most part, suffer the most, right? Within our own social circle. It's not when we're alone. It's not when we're dealing with strangers necessarily. It's the people in our lives that we love, right? Or trust. A lot of times that cause some of the biggest stresses in our life. And that we have to be prepared for that and be prepared to help them and hopefully receive help from them as well. Now, what gets most of us into trouble? If you're like me, it's your mouth, right? You talk too much. You say the wrong thing. There's a lot of politicians out there now, right? Or it's only down to two, but one of them staying more quiet, the other one's getting into a lot of trouble by opening their mouth, right? It happens to all of us, right? We say things that we don't necessarily mean, or we don't explain properly, or maybe we mean it, but it's hateful or it's hurtful. So Courage, same book, number 31, tells us this. I was totally prepared to use my phone. This is cool. Thank you, Pam. On controlling the speech. This concerns not only to talk, but above all, verifying what has resulted from our words. How often do we say stuff and it's misunderstood? We had one meaning and somebody took it the wrong way, right? So it's not just what comes out of our mouth or what we meant as we said it, it's how it's inferred. Every time that we transform our emotions and thoughts into words, we automatically are transferring feelings to those who listen to us, right? Whether it's directly or indirectly, people in our periphery that we may not be addressing, but they're overhearing us. Although you have pronounced beautiful words and selected phrases, if you haven't done it with goodness and understanding, then it is possible that you may receive only indifference and distance from friends who share life experiences with you. Even when your expressions are noble and grammatically correct, if you have employed any expression of pessimism, bitterness, irony, or insincerity, then your words will be similar to gold containers, which pour vinegar or poison, hurting and making bitter hearts around you. How often do you experience that, or maybe even do that, right? I can think, not so much now, but earlier in life, I could definitely be accused of being passive-aggressive in some relationships, where I didn't want to offend, but I'd get in just enough of a dig so that the other person knew that I was upset or that they hurt me in some way, right? So now I'm very mindful of that, and I still mess up. I still have that tendency to point out, trying to make my point without being in somebody's face. But when you do that, it doesn't really help, is what they're telling us. Because instinctively, our word usually brings a lot of our spirit. And that is to say, we express our feelings to those who pay attention to us. So if we are using bad language, if we're using angered speech, if we are reacting shortly or sarcastically or pessimistically with others, we're kind of conveying what's on the inside, right? This is how we feel about a situation. And if our speech and our thoughts are negative, that's what we're experiencing, negative energy. And that's why they recommend that we really pay attention to that. Kind of like some of the psychology we talked about in the first slide. Paying attention to your body language, paying attention to how you're interpreted or how others infer what you say, and being clear with your feelings as you speak. So in view of this, they recommend that we pay attention to everything we say. A conversation is an active donation from us, right? We're giving our thoughts and our words to the people we're talking to. Opinions that we express are utilized to make our moral picture. So I have a bad habit, again, less than it used to be, is I used to talk like a sailor, right? I had a foul mouth. In public, at home. This is going back, 20 years. I used to drink more. Actually, I don't drink at all really anymore, but I used to drink a lot. I used to smoke. I used to want to be tough, right? So I talk like a sailor, as they say. Now what I notice, right, that I don't do those things. I don't seem to offend people as much, first of all. Secondly, I'm not a type A personality anymore. I'm very calm, which transcends to the people around me. Because I contemplate what I say, because I don't go out of my way to use foul language, I'm nicer to be around, right, for the most part. I have people that enjoy conversations with me. So it's very important that what comes out of our mouth creates a positive environment. That doesn't mean we lie and create false pictures or false truths and over-flatter people. We don't want to be sarcastic or insincere. We want to be truthful, but we can do that in an uplifting way. So essentially, they go on to tell us that that we may alleviate the burden of those who are facing difficulties in life. However, what will become of those who are deeply immersed in bitterness if we do not encourage them with faith so that they may raise themselves as worthy of God's assistance and in need of his blessings as much as we do? If we don't uplift them with positive words, if we're not optimistic, if we overly insult or try to correct in a negative way, it's not beneficial to their needs, and it doesn't help the conversation. So the takeaway from this is, when we speak, what are we doing? We're really showing ourselves. What comes out of our mouth is what we were thinking. And when that's negative, when that's low level, when it's vindictive, when it's revengeful, right? That's the status of our being at the moment. So what we say tells the world who we are. So we need to be mindful of that. And by uplifting those words, right, it means our thoughts have been elevated. And it also means that we're morally developing. We're paying attention to that moral compass. Okay? So no more cursing. You can curse. All right, what's next? Sorry about the noise. We just covered this, right? Last one I'm going to read to you from a book. And this one I'm going to have to use my phone because it's from a different book. So we talked about our words. We talked about how people at home and in our social circle need us. just as much as strangers, right? This one pertains to the house, once again. And this is probably my favorite one of the night. It says, goodness domestically speaking is charity that begins in the home. Right? Do not shout at your loved ones by abusing your relationship with them. How many of you have kids? A lot of you? Do you ever find yourself raising your voice sometimes? I do, and I'm trying harder not to. I know that when I speak at their level, when I get down and look them in the eyes, right? If I get on a knee, if I ask questions, if I make a request in a normal way, a lot more happens, right? They connect to me, right? They tend to listen, and they get more engaged. But there's times when it just doesn't work, right? They're on the other side of the house. They're making noise. You've asked them to stop. They're supposed to be in the shower. And it's like, Gabriella, what are you doing? And what does she do, right? She freezes, right? That's not good. That means I'm scaring my kid, right? So this really hit home with me. So don't get me wrong. I don't do it a lot, but I know I still do it. So this is a reminder that in all of our conversations with our loved ones, it should be how we want to be spoken to. It should be out of love and respect, and we shouldn't raise our voice. It says, in order to safeguard the house against disturbance and perturbation, utilize domestic possessions without making noise. Right? So respect other people's space. Right? If your husband's trying to watch the football game, maybe maybe you sew, maybe you like to listen to jazz, maybe you like to work out, and the workout room is right close to the TV. Try to have respect for what they're trying to do so that everybody gets along. And it says, as much as you can, learn to help yourself so as to not to aggravate the family unit. Right? We all have needs. We all have access to the things in the house. And I don't know about you guys, but sometimes I ask my wife to do more things than I could probably do myself. But she's in the house a lot. She knows where everything is, right? I'm making excuses, right? Christiane, where's this? Where's that? Right? In her defense, I should say in my defense, not her defense, she likes to put things away a lot. And sometimes they don't always go back in the same place. Right? So I can't always find anything. But that's an excuse. I could look a little bit harder, right? So try to help yourself. Don't count on your spouse or your loved ones to do everything for you. As much as you're able to do that, right? Some of us have bigger needs from others. But what we can do ourselves, we should do. It says, collaborate on solutions for any problems which may arise without complaining excessively. Make your talk uplifting, we talked about. It's always possible to understand each other when we are willing to relinquish our point of view, thus providing a small demonstration of the renouncing of our views. So what does that say, essentially? That says, put down our pride, right? We all have a point of view. We all think we're right a lot of times, and sometimes we are, sometimes we aren't. But when we're in the heat of the moment, it's very easy to not want to be wrong. Right? You've invested this energy, you have this point of view, you've made your argument. Don't be afraid to back down or agree to disagree like we learned earlier. It's always okay to back off a little bit. Don't fight so hard. They go on to say that many times a problem which is apparently unsolvable needs only a calming word to be solved. How true is that, huh? Sometimes you'll have a situation where people are upset and they're disagreeing. I can think of many customer service examples we all have when we got to call our insurance company to fight about why we got billed, whatever we got billed when it should have been covered, right? You stay on hold for 96 minutes and you get disconnected, and then you call back and you're on hold for another 30 minutes, and finally you've got somebody that's listening and they don't understand you because they're someplace else and the connection's bad. It's really easy to get frustrated in those situations, but it doesn't help anybody. But in that simple situation, what I love to do, and it doesn't have to be that extreme, it can be any altercation. And this is me talking, this isn't from the spirits, from the gospel or anything like that. I just like to ask people, hey, how's your day going? You doing all right? And I got a big smile. And it's sincere. I'm not being fake. Because obviously we're not getting along. We're not solving our problem. You got a job to do. I have a need I need to fill. We got to do this together. And it's amazing how if I just look at somebody that's kind of cranky, that's not really doing good customer service. Hey, how's your day going? All of a sudden, it's contagious. They smile. Oh, it's all right. You know, it's kind of rough, but it's all right. And they ask me how my day's going. Next thing you know, we're communicating. I think that's huge. That you can apply to any situation, whether it's at the house or not. How many of you know people that you ask them how they're doing and you got 20 minutes of negativity? Yeah. Happens all the time, right? Right? Absolutely. I miss my grandmother very much. But when you go to her house, first thing she would say to me, "You're getting fat. Come on, let's eat." And she'd have, 20 pounds of pasta and 18 meatballs, right? And I'd sit there and I'd eat, man, because that was amazing food, right? And I would listen to her literally for the whole meal, even the tiramisu that she'd bring, right, at the end, right? Because you got to have dessert when you're at grandma's house, about all the things that are bothering her. So I listen. I'm a loving grandson. I adore the woman, right? So I listen. But what I noticed as I got older was people don't care about your problems, right? And if they hear I shouldn't say they don't care about your problems. They care, but when it's the same problem, it's the same story, and all you are is negative, they kind of put up a wall, and they don't listen anymore, right? So don't get me wrong. A lot of you guys are family in here to me, right? A lot of you guys are friends of mine, right? If you got a problem, come tell me, man. I'm here. I'm listening. I'm not trying to tell you that I'm not there to listen. But when you're telling people about your problems, do it in a way that's not always negative. There's ways to talk about what's bothering you and ask people for advice without being negative. So that's their advice here, right? Do not take advantage of a conversation to criticize or censor anyone. Right? It's real easy sometimes when we're talking to people, where another person, a third party, comes up, right? And then it's an opportunity to sometimes create gossip. So they're telling us to avoid gossip, avoid talking negatively about other people, right? If you are in a hurry, needing to go out, do it with serenity and respect so that you do not disturb the tranquility of other people. If you live with others, right? I get up very early in the morning to go to work, and I start my day well before my wife and kids wake up. So my alarm has to go off, otherwise I won't wake up. But I jump out of bed and I turn it off. And the things I do in the morning, from my reading to my meditation, I leave the room and I try to make as little noise as possible. And then I mess up, right? Because I got to eat breakfast. But I do it right around the time when the kids are supposed to be waking up and Christiani's waking up. I use a blender every morning to make some juice. And if I did that first thing, that would not be very polite to my wife. I would wake her up at 5 in the morning. Wouldn't be good. So I'm not saying I'm great or anything, but I've learned not to do it first thing. I wait until everybody's waking up. So that's an example of how we can think about the other person's needs before we do something. So that was from Greenlight, which is another book. I don't know if we have a copy in the bookstore or not, but it's filled with uplifting messages. But all of these pretty much say the same thing, right? It's about respecting others. It's about communicating, right? Not just what you mean to say, but what actually comes out of your mouth and what's inferred by the people you're talking to. About controlling your anger, about controlling your attitude in the conversations. So how do we garner the knowledge? How do we garner the fortitude to actually deliver on this, right? Because if you're like me, you still get mad sometimes. You still get frustrated at work or at home with your kids, right? We all have these buttons that can get pushed. So what I'd like to move into, and we'll finish with this tonight, is the Gospel According to Spiritism, Chapter 9, right? Why do I like to tie the gospel into this? Don't get me wrong, these books are awesome, and they're from elevated spirits that share their experience and their wisdom. But the Gospel According to Spiritism is examples and experiences from the greatest counselor of all time, right? The greatest, most evolved, elevated spirit to walk the earth, Christ, right? So that's why I love the gospel so much. That's why I read every morning now. And it's making a change in the way I spend my day. So what does the gospel say about this topic, right? It hits home affability and kindness, which we've talked about, goodwill towards your fellow man. If you're trying every moment in your relationship to do something better for your loved ones, you're always trying to put them first, which is hard. I'm not telling you I do this, right? I wish, right? I try. But if our sole motivation every moment of the day, or just when we're with them, maybe not every moment of the day, but when we're with our spouse or our loved ones, how can I make their life better, right? How can I do goodwill towards this person I love? If we each were doing that, imagine how much lighter our day would be, how much more our life would be filled with love. Because through warmth and kindness, it's hard to be angry and mad, right? If you're trying to help somebody, if you're trying to show somebody love, you're not going to do things that hurt them. And if you start it at home, right, it stays with you throughout your day, is what they tell us. They go on to tell us in the gospel that we should make our hearts gentle and mild. And if we do that, we're going to find our communication at home filled with goodness, compassion, and love, which is what we just talked about, right? If you're trying every moment of your interaction with your loved ones to be good to them, to help them, how can you not be filled with these three components, right? And if you have these components as part of your every moment of interaction with your loved ones, it's going to be a very happy environment, a very good environment. Doesn't mean you won't have challenges, doesn't mean you won't have disagreements. But if you're trying to solve your disagreements with these three components as a big part of it, it's going to be peaceful. And then when you're peaceful at home, I'm convinced it transcends into the rest of your life. If you can learn these things and apply them at home, it goes with you to the office or to school, wherever you go and spend your time when you're not at home. Patience. We talk about this a lot. Sometimes we have a whole 45 minutes on patience. Tonight we're going to spend just a couple minutes on patience. The takeaway from chapter 9 about patience is if you nurture it, right? If you're first patient with yourself, right? Don't beat yourself up. You're going to make mistakes, right? Forgive yourself. Hey, I messed up. I should have done this. I did that. But it's down. It's behind you, right? Don't worry about tomorrow. Just right now, in the moment, how can I be different? How can I fix that? And be patient with yourself. You're going to make mistakes, right? And the way you do this, right, is simply following the example that Christ taught us. He was the epitome of this. He was so patient with people of the time, right? He lost his temper a couple of times, right? But he was so patient, so loving, so kind. And if we can simply try to be more like him on a daily basis, it's going to impact our relationships. It's going to give us more patience. How about anger? Would you say that's kind of the opposite of anger? And I'm convinced, this is my 2 cents now. If all we did was eradicate ego and pride from our being, the rest of this would be easy, right? Because ego and pride leads to losing your temper, being angry. When you're proudful, you want to be better than everybody else. You think you're better than everybody else. You're aspiring to step over them and put yourself in the limelight, right? That just leads to discontent. It leads to anger. It leads to altercations. And it tells us that our pride can frequently lead to anger, which can stop us from doing good. Because if you're mad at somebody, how can you do any good? That's why I have to stop myself sometimes in some of those customer service calls that I mentioned. If my temper's starting to rise, if my patience is getting short, I have to stop and force myself to just say something positive and uplifting, like I told you that I do. How's your day going? You doing okay? That kind of stuff. Questions are a wonderful way to redirect a conversation, I've learned in life. When something's going wrong, just ask for clarification. Hey, I'm confused. What do you really mean? You know, stuff like that. And then they get to start over and maybe they reset, whatever. And that bottom sentence, right, is so true, right? A lot of times with perfect strangers, right, or acquaintances at work or business or school, the real us doesn't necessarily always come out. We're more guarded. We're maybe more cordial. We're less likely to blow up because we don't want to lose our job or be kicked out of class, right? Very often our anger will be more exposed at home than it is in public. And it's a really important place to try to work on reducing that. And we talked about this, right? The big recommendation in chapter 10 is about forgiving others. And who does that start with? I say it all the time. Yourself. Stop beating yourself up. You messed up. I do it all the time. It happens. But let it go. Forgive yourself. The other thing with forgiveness is, let's say that my friend Will here was really mean to me. He hurt me really bad. He did something that, 10 years ago, right, when I first met him. I don't think I've known Will that long, but let's pretend, yeah? He did something that hurt me. Well, Will only did one thing bad to me 10 years ago. But it's 10 years later, and I'm still, every time I see the guy, man, I can't believe he did that. How can he even be nice to me? I'm just kidding. Will's never done a bad thing to me. He was just who I was looking at the time. But my point is, we all have people that have hurt us and have done us wrong. Every time we relive the event, every time we have anger in our heart towards that event, every time we have revengeful thoughts towards that person, try to get ahead, try to hurt them like they hurt us, what are we doing? Are we hurting them, or are we hurting ourselves? Hurting ourselves, right? We're reliving the pain. It only happened once, but we relive it, right? Every time. Think about it like a razor blade, If you nicked your finger once with a razor blade, not a big deal, right? It's going to heal. But if you do that once a day, every day, you're gonna like lose your whole arm at some point because you're just going to keep working up the nub, right? Forgiveness towards others means two things to me. It means you're letting it go, right? You're forgiving them, and you're leaving it behind you. If you're holding on to it, you're still hurting yourself. You're still reliving it. That last sentence is the takeaway on this. It fuses the ability to forget and the willingness to pardon offenses. When you can honestly forgive, look the person in the eyes, right, and forgive them. Or let's say you don't see them anymore, but you're still holding on to the negative emotion. Just forgive them in your mind and let it go. And that's the fastest way to reduce negative consequences from negative actions and to reduce the anger associated with pain and hatred. Chapter 10 also tells us to be tolerant. And what does that mean? Take no notice of the defects of others. How often do we look at people and judge them? Right? I do it less and less. But I still make mental judgments in my head about people. Less and less, but still, I'm judging. Right? I think I shouldn't say I think we all do it. I think a lot of us do it. I'm sure there's other people out there that have gotten past this. So, but by and large, as a society, we have a tendency to judge. We see it on Facebook. We see it on all the social media sites. We see it in even news broadcasts nowadays. News shows have seemed to become more conversational or dialogue between different opinions. And we hear people not being tolerant of others. And that simply leads to anger. It leads to strife. It leads to other people trying to prove their point and hurting with people more. What the recommendation here, and it's amazing, right? Be critical of yourself. If you want to judge somebody, judge yourself. Judge your actions. But be tolerant of others, because tolerance draws in peace and harmony. I may not like everything I can think of at least 3 examples at work that I'm just not happy with, right? Policy things that I can't control. I don't own the place. I'm not the boss. But there's decisions that are made that I can't control. Right? I can talk bad about it. I could go talk to my boss and beat a dead horse over and over. But I can't do it, right? I could, but I'm tolerant. Okay, I can't control this. I can't fix this. I'm going to work within the parameters, do what I need to do to help people and work with it. So I'm tolerant of things I don't agree with. And I'm happy at work as a result, right? If I didn't like something that my neighbor did, right, I could definitely be up in arms about it. I could call code enforcement. I could go knock on their door. I could put his dog's bowel movements back on his yard or on his front porch, right, and be mean, right? But I'm tolerant of those situations, right? Life is easier because I'm tolerant. I'm not judging. And we see this so much in society. So the gospel tells us to be tolerant and try not to take notice of defects. If you're going to notice defects, notice your own, not somebody else's. What's the parable or the psalm, I forget, about before you judge your neighbor's splinter, right, in their finger, don't forget to take a look at that plank that's sticking out of your eye, right? You know, just be judgmental of yourself first. All right, finally, then we'll take a 5-minute break, and I'm just kidding. We're done. We've all seen this. And raise your hand if you think that, when you read that, it sounds so easy. Because when I read that, it sounds easy. It's two simple things, right? Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul. That's 3 things. And with all your mind, right? And then, love your neighbor. How hard is that? I don't want people to tread on me. I don't want people to tell me how to live, how to or judge me for you know, my hair, my whatever, you know. How hard is it to live like this? It sounds so easy. But it's the hardest thing sometimes. The loving God is easy. Right? I think that's easy. I love God. I bet you all love God. Right? With all your heart and with all your soul. I guarantee most of you would say, I can do that. Absolutely. But how about with all your mind? How many of us kind of get mad at the world sometimes? Right? So in our mind, we get mad at the powers that be, the universe, God. God, why is this happening to me? How come I didn't get that promotion? How come my wife didn't put the juicer where it belongs? Right? How come I got to go looking for it? Right? How come this is... Oh, man, she walked in. Man, I'm in trouble. But seriously, we do that, right? And that to me is where the reminding ourselves of reincarnation, right, really comes in. If you truly believe in reincarnation, right, the law of life after life, right, what do we know when we buy into that? God's not doing anything to us. The world is not conspiring, right? We are exactly where we put ourselves based on our actions in this life and previous lives. I'm dealing with all the adversity that I created for myself because of things I've done in the last 49 years. I know that's hard to believe, but I'm almost 50, right? Of all the decisions I've made in this life and the decisions I didn't make, as well as hundreds of lifetimes in the past. We're all sitting in the chair, walking in the shoes, talking the talk, right, that we created for ourselves. Only thing God has to do with this is He's provided everything I need to dig myself out of this, to progress, right? He's provided me with free will to make choices. He's provided me with the ability to forget how bad I was 100 years ago, right? How many bad things I did, right? So I'm not reminded of the past. I'm only provided with the ability to guide myself. He's given me all of the tools I need, right? I've got great friends. I've got great teaching. I've got great material from the gospel, right? From the Spirit's book. Great knowledge to learn from and to apply, right? All I got to do is study it, put it into practice. Sounds easy, right? But it's hard. But if we really believe in reincarnation, we know that it's us, not God, right? It's to me, that made my life easier. I stopped worrying about dying. I stopped worrying about other people dying. I mean, don't get me wrong, I don't want to die today. I'd like to live, right? I got things I want to do. But if I end now, if this body ends, it's okay. I'm on to the next thing, the next part of my evolution. Loving your neighbor as yourself is a double-edged sword in a way, right? Some of us don't love ourselves, right? Some of us hate ourselves. I know I have moments where I'm not happy with myself. Loving your neighbor as yourself takes work, right? Because you got to start by loving yourself and being tolerant, not judgmental. And I think that's really hard. It sounds so easy. But to wrap up, the only thing limiting us from this is us, right? Nobody's pulling the string. Nobody's setting traps for us necessarily. We have the ability, thanks to the gift of free will, to choose what we're going to do. To make no choice at all is still a choice. So we have to make that decision if we're going to get involved, if we're going to help our neighbor, if we're going to help our wife, if we're going to help ourselves, or are we going to walk around that person in need? Are we going to avoid the conversation with that loved one that we haven't had, that we haven't resolved? How many of you, if you left the world today, this life, not the world, this life, have something that you didn't finish with a relationship? All of us probably to some degree. We don't know when our time is up, right? So we should all prioritize correcting this as soon as possible. Because it's easy, right? And hard at the same time. I will not take any more of your time. Thank you so much for your attention. I appreciate the opportunity to present this. Tim, did we find anybody for the passage? I mean, for the vibrations? Okay. So I'm going to just transition. We're a little short-staffed tonight. What we're going to do tonight before the passes is we're just going to we're going to take 5 minutes off. We're going to do a guided meditation. That's not me. It's a recorded message that you can find on YouTube, I believe. It's called 5 Minutes Off. It's very cool. And the reason we do this from time to time, or we do a moment of meditation, is one, to collect ourselves, right? To focus, to meditate, to pray, get ready, prepare ourselves for the passes we're going to receive so we can really take advantage of that healing process, right? Also, it's to remind you that you can do this at home. It's not, you don't have to know how to meditate. You don't have to create your own stuff. There's tons of resources that you can use to try to do a little bit of meditation every day. There's tons of books that you can read 1 page a day to try to improve things. So let's do that tonight. Let's do our 5 minutes off here. So bear